No, you got me.
Don't look at each other.
Hello, friends, readers, and book lovers. Welcome back to part 3 of our book club series. And this part, we're going to talk about nonfiction book recommendations for your book club. If you missed part 1 and 2, in part 1, we talked about how to start a book club. In part 2, we talked about, okay, I have my book club, now what? And now we're going to talk about nonfiction book recs. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the marketing manager here at Schuler Books.
And I'm Amy. I'm one of the buyers. And I think I'm kicking us off here,
Yes.
aren't I? All right, so I'm going to start with something really simple. If your book club is like, I don't know about nonfiction, I want something simple, I can't stay with it. This is The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. She wrote the very popular Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a wonderful book, but it is hefty. It takes some investment. This takes sort of a metaphor that I know exists throughout the Braiding Sweetgrass and just focuses a little bit more on it. But this talks about abundance and reciprocity in the natural world, using the plant, the serviceberry, as an example, to talk about just imagining a different way to be in community with each other, that we don't always have to have this scarcity mindset, that there's not enough to go around. Sort of an alternative to normal capitalism, where everything has to cost money, that, you know, there can be reciprocity, and you can think about the world in terms of abundance. There's plenty of food if we didn't all hoard it, or if we didn't have certain charges for it, or if it wasn't all in one part of the world. Like, just it prompts you to imagine a different way of being in community with people. So that's an interesting one.
All right, I'm also starting with a short and sweet, easy to kind of get into. This is The Book of Delights by Ross Gay, and it is a series of essays. They're very short, like 2 to 4 pages, where he did a project, like an individual project. Yeah, like this is 1, 2-ish pages. He did a project for a year where he journaled every day about what he found delight in. So what about his day was delightful? What was joyful? What emotions was he feeling, and how could he like seek out more delight in his day? And he wrote about that, and this is like essentially his journal in book form, that you can read through. And I think this is so fun for book clubs to like be able to together try to like look for those things in your life, look for delight in your life, and maybe you also do the practice of like writing down what you find delight in and sharing with each other what is delightful in your life that month. And again, like easy to digest and accomplish little chunks, because they're so short of sections, which is great for book club.
All right, this is one of our favorites.
Yes.
This is The Art Thief by Michael Finkel, a true story of love, crime, and a dangerous obsession. This is the story of the world's most prolific art thief, a man who, I can never remember his name, Stefan Breitweiser, who stole countless works of art, small, big, everything in between. But he was not caught, or it took a long time for them to catch him, because he wasn't doing it for the money. He was not selling these things on the black market. He was not doing it for the notoriety. He was doing it simply to possess those things because he believed that they were not being appreciated enough, or that he had to own them in order for them to fully serve their purpose in the world, or whatever. So this is like true crime, but without any of the gore.
Yes. No murder involved.
No murder, no blood. And you also get, if you like the psychology of criminal minds or things like that, you get a lot of psychological analysis into like what compels a person to do this,
right,
and do it this way, which is so different than a lot of other art thieves. And like, you get some interviews with Stefan and with psychologists. Just a really fascinating book about a really interesting guy.
For sure. All right, I'm a little bit on a theme here, but this is Joyful by Ingrid Fattel Lee. And I read this book several years ago, and it really stuck with me, which I think is a good hallmark of a good nonfiction book. And in the way that the Book of Delights is about like how you feel and will like tracking and journaling your emotions, this is how like the outside world influences how you feel. And so Ingrid did like a a lot of research on how the physical space around us impacts our mood and makes us happier or sadder or some other complicated emotion, and how we can maybe like alter our physical world to change our attitude. One of the things that like really stuck with me is she does this study on nursing homes and like life expectancy in nursing homes based on like the colors of the walls and like how happy or cheerful like their physical space is. So I thought it was fascinating. It was an easy to read but well researched. There's a lot of good research in this, and again, great for discussion.
Mm-hmm. All right, this is one for the word lovers. This is Cultish, The Language of Fanaticism by Amanda Montell. This studies the way that groups, cults, other organizations use language in certain ways to develop community, but also as a manipulation tactic. So it talks about actual cults like the Jonestown Massacre or the Jonestown Cult Massacre, the Scientology, Soul Cycle, all of those. It also talks about like multi-level marketing schemes and pyramid schemes like that, and just how they use certain phrases or key catchwords to make you feel like one of the group, but then also to like other you from other people. And I mean, all groups do this. Even like in book selling, we have terminology that we use that makes us in or out. But the way it can be used as manipulation of people, especially people who are susceptible to cult-like groups because they don't feel like they belong anywhere, and these groups sort of prey on that. Just a really fascinating look at how language can be used in nefarious ways.
Yeah. All right, this is The Matter of Everything by Susie Sheehy. It's how curiosity, physics, and improbable experiments changed the world. So I think this is my challenge pick for a book club. It's a little bit harder to get through because it's a little heavier on the science, on the physics. Susie is a physicist, and she did write this book with the intention that anyone could read it, and so it is accessible, but it's a little bit of more dense, I would say. So this might be like it takes you 2 months for your group to get through it instead of one. But it's really fascinating in that she walks you through several experiments that have fundamentally changed our world in some way, changed how we understand our world, how we operate in the world, and how physics is really impacting all of us all the time. And I think this is a good thing for like, if you just want to know more about like the space we are living in, the world we are living in, this is a really good exercise of kind of working your brain out in that way and learning more about those things.
Here's another one to exercise your brain a little bit. This is a book of poetry. This is Wild Embers by Nikita Gill. It's poems of rebellion, fire, and beauty. I would recommend anything by Nikita Gill. I love her work. She has some novels in verse. She has some like fairy tale retellings called Fierce Fairy Tales and Greek Goddesses. She grounds a lot in mythology and familiar stories. But she talks a lot about resilience, about our place in the universe. So if your book club is not like my book club right now, where a member just said, I refuse to do poetry. So if we pick poetry, I'm not going to read it. If you're curious, I think this would be a fun one, especially if you've got some creatives in your group. This could also be a one where you tie in an activity where you try your hand at writing a poem to share with the group, or you work on writing a poem together or something. But poetry by Nikita Gill, or any poetry, would be a good one.
Cool. Right, this is Ordinary Time, Lessons Learned While Staying Put by Annie B. Jones. Annie B. Jones is someone that I've followed on the internet for a long time, and I just really admire her as a person and a writer and a small business owner. But she is a bookstore owner in Georgia, and she wrote this book out of the place of like, I thought that my life was going to be this big, exciting life, probably in New York, probably as a journalist, and I was going to travel all the time and do all these like what your younger self thought to be like the most exciting version of your life. And instead, she's in a small town in Georgia with a bookstore, and she has spent her life staying put while others moved away. And it's an examination of like what if your life isn't what you thought it was going to be, but can you find the beauty and goodness where you are anyway? And can you recognize how good it is to be where you are, and how to develop and invest in friendships even when they change or morph, and like resetting expectations along the way. It's written in essays. There's also some faith elements. She talks about her Christian faith. And there's a few pieces of that, but it's a lot of small business ownership and friendship, relationship, things like that. So I think anybody could find something to connect to there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson. Jenny Lawson is also a bookstore owner. She lives in Texas, but she writes nonfiction, hilarious stories about her life struggling with mental health issues, a variety of them, and how her family interacts with her, and how her, she talks about her, I can't remember if it's an uncle or somebody who does taxidermy, like just all sorts of bizarre stories, but how they tie together, and how her mental health has either helped her through it or made it more of a struggle. As someone who does struggle with mental health issues, this is very, very relatable. If you have someone in your life, which you most likely do, this might help you to understand a little bit what they're going through, but always, 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 and just a hilarious, like you will laugh while reading any Jenny Lawson book. And this is probably my favorite of hers. So Furiously Happy.
Right, you didn't hear this from me. Mostly True Notes on Gossip by Kelsey McKinney. So Kelsey McKinney is another like internet personality that I found before I found this book. And she started a podcast called Normal Gossip. And on Normal Gossip, they have people submit gossip stories, they anonymize them, and then they tell them back to a guest. And then the guest gets to like react in real time to this story being told to them. And throughout the project of this podcast, she started having discussions with people about like, what does gossip mean to you? What place does it hold in your life? Is gossip good or bad? And I think her perspective kind of evolved and changed over time, and influenced all the people around her to like also be having these conversations. And so then she went and wrote this book that's like a research on the history of gossip, the importance of gossip, because there is some importance to gossip, especially in communities of women. It has been a safety technique to kind of share important information with each other. And then you can kind of like make your own conclusions of like, at the end of the day, do we think it's good or bad? But I think it's a really fun read. Again, research-based, but very fun, very easily accessible.
All right, Good Soil by Jeff Chu. Jeff Chu is another local Michigan author that we love. He worked as a journalist for many, many years, and then decided to go to seminary. He went to seminary at Princeton Seminary in New Jersey, and Princeton owns a plot of land which they call the Farminary. And Jeff Chu applied to work on that farminary, and this is sort of a chronicling of his time working there. And he did that as someone who really didn't have a lot of experience with plants and gardening and anything like that, but sort of what he learns about interacting with other people, our preconceived notions about ourselves and others, working in community, working with the world, and like how we interact with the world is just beautiful. He has a whole section about the theology of compost and how you get like the good, the bad, the ugly. The whole cycle is there. It doesn't necessarily have to be good or bad. It's all of it there, that everything has a purpose. It's written again in like little essays, really accessible. He is in seminary and he is a person of faith, so that does tie through there. But I think that even if you don't have that background, you can appreciate it. He's also a queer man and Asian American. And so he talks a lot about his community growing up, his grandparents in China, and just his life as a queer man in a faith community. Just there's so much that you can get out of this one. He also includes little recipes, and there's lots to talk about food, so you'll want to be snacking the whole time on fresh farm vegetables, which is, if you know me, it's not like me, but now I want fresh farm vegetables.
All right, talking about snacking. I brought 2 cookbooks because I brought these as like a concept for your book club, because I don't think book clubs always have to follow the same format or be what you traditionally think of as book club. I think you could start a cookbook club if you wanted. And if you had a cookbook club, maybe you picked a cookbook every month and you all picked a recipe out of it and you had dinner together and all the food on the table was made out of this cookbook, or some version of that. Or maybe you're in a traditional book club and you need like a month break with something different, and so you pick a cookbook that month and talk about the cookbook, bring some recipes from that cookbook, things like that.
That would be a fun holiday one to just do something a little different.
For sure. So these are the two cookbooks that I think that I would put forward for cookbook book club. Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nasrat. And this is a like how to cookbook. So if you like don't understand how cooking works, Samina's gonna hold your hand and walk you through it through the lens of salt, fat, acid, heat, of like every food meal should have these elements, and here's how these elements work together. Here's some of the science behind it, and then there's also recipes in here, but there's lots of like fun like watercolor charts and interesting illustrations and stuff to go along with the learning how to cook part of this cookbook. And then we have every season is soup season, which is a fun modern soup cookbook that is written by a Midwest author. So if you live in the Midwest, she does have some like techniques of like it goes through seasons, and so we get to a point here in Michigan where like fresh produce is hard to come by, and so she like talks about that in here of like how do you like make good food, good healthy food when fresh produce is hard to come by. But all of the bases of these soups are vegetarian, which is really great for a mixed group that might have different dietary restrictions. And then there's optional like add-ins for your meat eaters, for like some kind of fun topping for your soup, or how to use a soup in an interesting way as a leftover, or things like that, which is really just a cool element that I haven't seen in other cookbooks that I think is really unique and interesting about this one.
Fantastic. I also have one that I think would tie in well with activities. If you either are in a book club that has fiber arts artists, knitters, sewers, anything, or if you're interested in those things, this is a fairly new book called With Her Own Hands by Nicole Nahrig, Women Weaving Their Stories. This is a history of how women have used fiber arts, not just as women's work, like darning a sock or whatever, but as really powerful tools for communication, for learning, for independence. It talks about how how women would use like little stitching samplers to teach geography or alphabet or mathematics, how they would tell like family stories through tapestries, all of that sort of thing is in this, a nice history of fiber arts. And I think it would be fun if you each brought like a little sampler or some knitting or something to talk about it. You could be like Taylor Swift with your sewing and your things and just talk about women's work that is actually more than just women's work.
Thanks for joining us, and we hope you have some happy reading.
Join us next time for
part 4, where we talk about fiction.
Yes.